Yes. Well, I certainly tried to do that, and I must confess, and if there's any aspiring authors out there listening to this show, if I had to give any advice, I had the good fortune when I first started writing, not my biography, but when I first started writing women's fiction, of being invited to join a writer's critique group. And I was so green and naive, David, I didn't even know what a writer's critique group did. I didn't even know what they do. But I was explained, how you take along something you've written and you share it with a small group of people. And I was able to start in one of those at my very first outset of my fictional writing. And they have helped enormously in more ways than one. And if I have had any success with any of my books, a lot of it is credit to this critique group, because they would say to me, well, we're not seeing this character, you haven't done it. We can't see what they look like. We can't relate to them. And I'd have to go back to the drawing board and, tweak this and tweak that and put more depth into the books. And you learn through experience. And as I said, for any aspiring authors, I would say if you can find a critique group, join in, because their perspectives on your writing is absolutely invaluable before you even get it to an editor or to a publisher. It's just good to get that feedback as to whether people can relate to what you're writing, whether they care about the characters, whether you define them enough where people care what happens to them. That's the key, really. Do people care about the characters that you're writing? Do they feel anything? Do they warm to them? Do they despise them? Do they loathe them? Have you created a character that people can relate to emotionally?
Everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. Joining me today from Las Vegas, Nevada. It's like a mini Canada, which we talked about today. There's a little bit of snow in Nevada, and you're like, wait, there is? Yeah, there is. And Stephen Murray is on the podcast today to talk about his books, his writing. He's on television. He does a lot of great things. He's a great gentleman to talk to, and I'm so happy he has time for us here on the podcast. Stephen, welcome to Living the Next Chapter.
Thank you, David. It's my pleasure being with you. I enjoyed our talk before when we spoke about a month or so ago, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on your program.
It's excellent to have you here. And when people hear your beautiful voice, Stephen, they're thinking, wait a minute, you said Las Vegas, Nevada, and Stephen sounds so regal. I feel like I need to sit up proper when Stephen speaks. Where are you originally from, Stephen?
Originally from the south of England, David. Originally, I was born there, but I left there as a very young child. So I guess the accent stays with you wherever you go, I suppose.
It's very proper, and I love listening to you speak, and it does make me sit up straight. I feel like I do need to sit up straight, because Stephen's here, everyone. Sit up straight, everybody. Stephen's here. So it's great to have you on the show.
Well, I hope on my TV show, I hope I don't make my guests sit up straight. I hope I make them feel relaxed.
No, I love it. It's great. I think it's wonderful. Thanks. And Stephen, so you are an author. You've been writing, and you have some very interesting books that you put out into the world. Can you tell us, how did it all start for you that becoming an author was something that you wanted to pursue?
It was quite by accident, David, to be quite honest. I had never planned on writing. I had never thought about writing a book, but I have traveled extensively throughout the world. And one day I thought it would be nice to put all these different experiences from these different countries, the different cultures, down on paper, what I'd experienced, what I'd seen and witnessed, and the marvelous place I've been to. And I just sat down and started writing. I'd never been to a writer's class or anything like that. And I spent 2 years, and then it was like, what do I do with this now that I've finished writing it? And I discovered a little group, a writer's group, not far from where I live, and I signed up to go to one of their meetings, and the guest speaker that night happened to be a publisher, and she said, nobody's going to buy anything these days unless it's women's fiction. And I thought, shucks, I don't know anything about women's fiction, but I had discovered a joy of writing and writing a biography. And I sat down and had a stab at writing a women's fiction book, and the rest is history. That's that was how it all started. That was about 12 years ago now.
Wow. How many books do you have currently at the time of recording?
I have 6 self-published novels.
6.
And
Wow.
the biography of my travels, incidentally, is still sitting gathering dust in my computer. Because I was told people would not be interested in, they're not interested in biographies unless you're, somebody really famous. So I don't know.
Well, a couple more weeks, Stephen, and you'll be really famous, and then we'll need that book done. So get to work. Get to work.
You know what?
It.
I'd like to think I've learned a lot over the years on writing, and I'd probably have to go back and do major edits and rewrites on it. Hopefully we learn a lot as we go.
How are you developing as a person now that you're an author? What kind of lessons are you learning? How are you growing as a person just by chasing this authorship journey of yours?
I think one thing I have learned, I think whenever you put something out on paper, there is a part of you inside that is being put out there in the book somehow or somewhere. I find character development, I've learned a lot through character development as I'm trying to develop characters in the books, and whether they're mean or whatever their personalities are, digging inside yourself to see if you can really relate to the emotion that you're putting out there, whether it's jealousy, love, hate, or whatever it is. And I think you learn a lot about yourself because there are some personality traits that I just can't identify with. And so it's very hard to develop a character. I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned. The journey, I think I've just met so many amazing people. It's just been a wonderful experience. And some of them have become very, very good friends. But I've met a lot of wonderful people at book signings and presentations, and being on programs like this. They've just all been wonderful experiences. I think it's brought me out of a shell, if you will, quite a bit.
That's interesting because I think, because I have a podcast, it opens doors for me to meet new people. And then in the same way, becoming an author gives you new opportunities that would present themselves had you not been an author. So you have your television series, which we're going to talk about as well. That's maybe a thing that's been a result in some way tied to you putting yourself out there and becoming an author and developing yourself. These other additional things come our way just by us being disciplined to create content and write our books.
Well, the TV show definitely did come about as a direct result of being an author. And as you said, we'll probably talk about a little bit about that later. But that's absolutely true. It does open all kinds of doors. And you get to go to and speak to groups that I would never have been aware of. You just go into different places, coffee shops and art galleries where I've held book signings and things like that. And you just see how a whole other worlds work and what they have to do. And it's just been very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Speaking at having book signings at health food stores and beauty salons and florist shops and things like that. It's just been very, very, very interesting. Met a lot of wonderful, interesting people.
Excellent. When you talk about traveling around the world, how many countries have you been to?
41 on all 5 continents.
Wow.
Yes. And several places in your own beautiful country, I might add too. Enjoyed every one of my visits there. Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, Victoria Island, British Columbia. All very, very beautiful place.
Yeah, great. My wife and I will be going to Calgary in September for the first time. I've flown over Calgary, but I've never been to Calgary and seen that beautiful part of the country. So what part of Calgary did you see?
We went to, it's just Lake Louise.
Okay,
went up
beautiful.
to Lake Louise, and we stayed at the hotel right on the lake there, and you hear the glaciers crashing every night. And we drove through some of the ice fields and beautiful scenery, beautiful countryside. my visit
Excellent.
there.
See, now that's what I love. Okay, from the different 41 countries you've been to, is there a country that really like amazed you or delighted you in a way that you didn't anticipate when you went there?
I would have to say the Kingdom of Bhutan up in the Himalayas. Very small country, and it was restricted to visitors for, well, I think they didn't allow visitors in until the king passed away back in 1976 or something, but it was a blocked off country to tourism. And I believe even to this day, it's only limited tourists. And there's only two ways of getting in there. One from Nepal and the other's from Thailand. And they have their own airline twice a week that flies in. It only holds 72 people. There's no roads going in there. So it shows you how isolated, if you will, the country is. And that just really surprised me, just because the beauty of the country and the charm of the people. They're all Buddhists, of course, and they're all very, very giving and loving, and they can't do enough for you. Just a very giving, trusting people. Beautiful, magnificent countryside. There's not more than 1/2 a mile that is straight road in the entire country. It just bends and wives and weaves and uphill and down to beautiful, breathtaking valleys and rivers and lakes, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful vacation. They've all been wonderful. Every country has its own charm, but I think this one, it was so difficult to get into, so difficult to get there, and it just went beyond the expectations.
How does traveling and seeing all these amazing places around the world, 41 countries, has to have some kind of impact on when you sit down to write? Because you have different perspectives just seeing that and picturing that country, for example. I see the joy on your face as you explain the scenery and the beauty of that place. That has to feed its way into your writing somehow. How does it impact you as an author?
I'm not too sure, because I try to make all of my books in total imagination. I don't do much research on my books at all. And on the subject of that, for example, one of the books is a crime fiction book set in Las Vegas. And it's about 3 ladies that work for the most exclusive escort agency in Las Vegas. And the guy that runs it treats them like dirt. So they come up with the perfect crime to get rid of him. And when I go and speak at places, one of the questions is, how did you research for this book? And of course,
yes, Stephen.
Yes, and I have to say, there is no research. It is all 100% from the mind and imagination. And of course, they look at me and they say, oh, yeah, right. Okay, we believe you, thousands wouldn't. But it's absolutely true. I try and keep my personal life and personal experiences away from my fiction novels. And I don't know why, I just do. Maybe if I write a book that is set in a different country, maybe I'll set it in one of the countries that I've been to and then draw on those experiences. The only one that is prevalent in my writing is Murder Aboard the Queen Elizabeth II. And I did happen to have the good fortune to go on the Queen Elizabeth II, travel on that from London to New York. And so when I wrote a book about that, I was able to draw on my personal experiences, remembering the shop names, the restaurant names, and the names of the suites and all of that kind of stuff. So it did lend some credibility to the book.
Yeah, I think even just the way that you describe, again, going back to that country, recently open to tourists, and the beauty of that country, the terminology and how you're explaining it, that's a gift just to be able to communicate that way, to bring us in. And we feel like we're there on the plane with 72 people flying into this beautiful country with you because of how you're describing it. I think as an author, we can do better to describe, use rich words and terminology and our vocabulary and how we paint a picture with our words that you've done that with us, just talking about that country. And I think you can bring that in, that ability, you can bring that into your writing and make your writing even deeper and connect better with your reading audience.
Yes. Well, I certainly tried to do that. And I must confess, and if there's any aspiring authors out there listening to this show, if I had to give any advice, I had the good fortune when I first started writing, not my biography, but when I first started writing women's fiction, of being invited to join a writer's critique group. And I was so green and naive, David, I didn't even know what a writer's critique group did. I didn't even know what they do. But I was explained, how you take along something you've written and you share it with a small group of people. And I was able to start in one of those at my very first outset of my fictional writing. And they have helped enormously in more ways than one. And if I have had any success with any of my books, a lot of it is credit to this critique group, because they would say to me, well, we're not seeing this character. You haven't done it. We can't see what they look like. We can't relate to them. And I'd have to go back to the drawing board and, tweak this and tweak that and put more depth into the books. And you learn through experience. And as I said, for any aspiring authors, I would say if you can find a critique group, join in, because their perspectives on your writing is absolutely invaluable before you even get it to an editor or to a publisher. It's just good to get that feedback as to whether people can relate to what you're writing, whether they care about the characters, whether you define them enough where people care what happens to them. That's the key, really. Do people care about the characters that you're writing? Do they feel anything? Do they warm to them? Do they despise them? Do they loathe them? Have you created a character that people can relate to emotionally?
So talk, Stephen, to us about your most recent book. Which one is it, and what are we going to find when we grab it for the first time and open the cover?
Well, the last one was totally different. All the books I've written, David, have been in different genres, and I do that deliberately because I like the idea of writing in a new genre. I like the challenge of writing something different. And the latest book is a very light-hearted paranormal called Yours in Spirit. And people often laugh when you say light-hearted paranormal, because paranormal by nature is not light-hearted. But if one thinks about it, there are light-hearted paranormals. For those who can remember far enough back, there was a television show called I Dream of Ginny. And Bewitched was another very light-hearted paranormal. And for those who can remember further back, there was a movie called The Ghost of Mrs. Muir with Rex Harrison and Gene Tierney. And it was turned into a television series back in the 70s. So there is something called light-hearted paranormal. And my book is a light-hearted paranormal. It's about an extremely wealthy American widow. She was married for over 50 years, and her husband left her very wealthy. And they spent their honeymoon in the south of England and many of their vacations in the south of England. So when he passes, she decides to go back to where she had the happiest of her memories with her husband in the south of England. She purchased this century-year-old home. Unbeknownst to her, it is occupied by a spirit who owned that house 100 years earlier. It was given to him as a birthday gift. And so now the two of them have got to coexist in this house. And of course, they're from different cultures. She's American, modern American. He's Victorian English. So they're from different cultures, different time periods in history. Obviously opposite sexes. And now they have to learn to live with each other and overcome their differences. So it's very lighthearted. It's fun. The two of them bicker, they banter, they have fun together. As I said, they have their little spats, but they do work well together. They manage to solve a little crime together. And there's a little supporting cast of characters there to take it away just from the two of them. So it's very fun. So far, it hasn't had that many reviews because it hasn't been out there that long, but the reviews so far have been positive, and it's been very pleasantly surprising because I didn't know how people would take to it. But sometimes you just got to take a chance and put something out there and see how it flies. And so far, it seems to be flying pretty well.
Nice. So the same for yours in spirit, all from your imagination then?
Yes, yes,
Wow.
all from the imagination, and this was it was interesting to write because when she moves into the house, the male spirit Albert, he can see her, but she can't see him, and she can talk to
Hmm.
him, but he cannot talk to her. So he has to
Wow.
communicate through little notes, and she'll be sitting at the dining room table, and the little piece of paper will just come wafting down, and it's got a little note on, and she reads it, and then she'll say, "Now, Albert, we really need to do this," and then the note turns over, and something comes out scribbled on the back, and so it's an interesting take because it's not a ghost in the true sense of the word ghost, where you can see a human being. It literally is a spirit, we don't see spirits. So that's why she can't see him. She can just see the ink coming out on the paper.
How long did it take to write yours in spirit?
It took almost 2 years, but most of my books have taken just about 2 years.
Okay.
And in part, David, I know people can sit down and they just write away and they can just write for hours when the spirit, no pun intended, when the spirit moves them,
Yes.
they can just sit down and write for hours. But I tend to be more of a disciplined writer. And again, I like everything to go through my critique group, which is still meeting. And we meet twice a month. And so each time I go, I just take one chapter. And a lot of the times they'll come up with suggestions, and I've got to go back and do rewrites. So the book is about 34 chapters, I think 35, but it took 52 weeks. But it's more by design because I hold back. I try not to go too far into the book without getting my critique group's approval. So I haven't gone too far down a wrong path, and they say, "Hey, you're taking this in the
Yeah.
direction that's not going to work," and I've wasted all that time. So I try not to get too far ahead of the critique group meetings.
So for a young author then, Stephen, whose early days in their journey of becoming an author, that critique group, you really keep mentioning it a lot. That's a good, valuable thing for new authors to consider, is to write in some form of community then?
Yes, I think so, because there you can't discuss your book necessarily with friends and expect them to be objective about it. I mean, they can, yes, they're interested, but when you're meeting with fellow authors, they are looking at from an author viewpoint, and they will tell you where there are any deficiencies in the storyline. And if you get too far into the book, and if a new author's just writing by themselves and they just go down the road, they're not seeing the deficiencies. And it's amazing. One of the things that I learned from the critique group was how we think we've conveyed everything so clearly on the paper, and in fact, we haven't. And I'll just give you a little example. The very first book that I wrote, I was told to write for women's fiction. So I wrote a book called The Chapel of Eternal Love. It's about a fictional Las Vegas wedding chapel. I mean, we are the marriage capital of the world here in Las Vegas.
Right.
So in this book, the reader spends a day at the wedding chapel. You meet all these couples as they come and go, why they fall in love, why they got married. And the ladies in the critique group, when they started reading the chapters and the brides at the altar, they say, "Well, what's she wearing?" And I'd say, "Who cares about what she's wearing? That's not part of the story. The point of the story is," and they say, "Well, if you're writing for women, we want to see what she looks like. We want to see her dress. We want to see what's in her bouquet. We want to be able to smell that bouquet." I had never considered I thought, who cares about the bouquet? Who cares about what she looks like? But I'm writing from a male perspective. But if it's for
Mm-hmm.
women, And the ladies in the group said, if you're writing for women, we want to know those details. We want to see those things. They've got to be visible. We've got to smell them. We've got to see them. Back to the drawing
Well,
board. So that's where it helps. We think that we're making a point, but it's not necessarily always clear. It's not always visible to other people. And that's the importance, especially for new aspiring authors. That's why it was so important to me. And as I said, to the extent I've had success with the books, a lot of it is due to credit is due to these ladies.
do you have a little message for your writing critique group? They might be listening as they hear you on here talking about this amazing group. Would you like to give your thanks to them as they listen to this?
My thanks to Sue Montgomery, who welcomed me to the group at the outset. I was very, very nervous, very apprehensive. I was very intimidated meeting authors. I just thought, boy, what am I doing with all these amazing, creative, talented people? And there was me with my little biography. And Sue Montgomery was one, and we were later joined by Nancy Nelson, who wrote literature. She now writes poetry. And Danelle Naven. And then my former business partner decided to join the group, RJ Champion. And so there's the five of us. And what's nice is we're all writing different things. RJ writes essays. Nancy writes poetry, mainly about Alzheimer's and dementia, because that's what she is living with now. Danelle writes for young adults. And Sue Montgomery just writes adult fiction for, adults. So we're all writing different things, and that's what makes it interesting. We're not all writing a murder mystery. We're not all writing comedy or romance. We're all writing in different genres, and that's makes it interesting.
Well, I think we put some smiles on some faces just by acknowledging them, Stephen. So, and I'm sure they're very happy to have you there now as well. When you walk through the door as a brand new author, early days in the journey, and are accepted by your peers, to know that you are now equally part of that group, giving feedback to help them. You're now one of those contributors as well. You're not just there to receive, you're there to give. So I love that your group is growing. That's great.
Thank you, David. But, it is all about giving back, isn't it, really? I don't think we're just all put here to take all the time. When we receive, they always say it's better to give than to receive. And so when you receive things, it's important that we give it back. And I certainly did a lot of things wrong when I first started writing and publishing. I did it all backwards, all incorrect, but it all worked out fine. And as I said, critique is very important, and getting one's book professionally edited is the other very, very important thing. Those are the two things I would strongly recommend to anybody, is have that book professionally edited. Please don't put it out there if it isn't. Because if it's not, and it starts getting bad reviews on Amazon or anything like that, it can kill you, Yeah. And it's one thing, it's okay to get some bad reviews on Amazon or anywhere else, because not everybody's going to like what you put out there anyway. That's why we have menus in restaurants, so there's different tastes and different people.
Exactly.
But if your book is very poorly written and very poorly edited, you're going to get a slew of bad reviews, and it's going to kill any hope, not only for the book, but anything that you write in the future. It's just going to kill it.
Right. Perfect. Now, you said that it's better to give than to receive. That's very common. I've heard that many times. That's also an amazing segue to your TV show that you do. Can you tell us about that? With it's better to give than to receive? How does you have a TV show as well? Can you tell us about that?
Well, and it does in a way segue from the author, because I was speaking at a senior center, and 6 of us authors were invited to participate, and we all had to get up and say why we wrote in our own, or why we select the genres we wrote in, and give a little bit about our background. And one of the authors present hosted a television series, and she invited us all on her television show, which is called What's My Story? And the name is Judy Morio. And I went on a TV show, and we discussed my travels and my books. And it's a small station. The station owner is John Stars, a very charming, very nice gentleman. And after I left, I was driving home and Judy called me and thanked me for being a guest on her program and said, "I ever thought of hosting a television show?" And I said, "Absolutely not." I was just kind of horrified at the idea. But then I got to thinking about it. And I called her back and I said, "You know, I would consider it." But I said, "I don't know whether the station owner would like me to have a show." And she said, "Well, what would it be about?" And I said, "The news is so awful these days. Who wants to tune in and listen to the news anymore? It's downright depressing." And there's all these organizations in Nevada that are doing amazing things. Well, there are anywhere in the world, but Nevada, where we don't have the best of reputations because people come here and they lose their money and they just think we're a state where we just grab people's money. And they're amazing people doing amazing things and giving back to the community. And they get like a 30-second spot on the news program. And I said, "No, I'd like to do a half-hour show and pull some of these organizations in and let them talk about what they are doing to make our world a better and brighter place." And she spoke to the station owner, and he was absolutely on board with the idea. He said he just loved the concept. And so last year we started a show called The Gift of Giving, and we've interviewed 42 organizations across the board. They're all nonprofits and foundations, and they get 30 minutes to talk about what they do. And the idea is to raise awareness of these organizations, hopefully get some more volunteers for them, and hopefully get some more money for them. A lot of them struggle to keep the lights on and a roof over their head and what have you, and they just struggle. So they need all the publicity they can get, and they're just doing amazing things. And it's been a pleasure and an honor to have some of these people on, and very humbling too, I might add. You suddenly realize, sometimes I think, what have I got to complain about? Why do I go out and complain about this? I've got nothing to complain about at all. I've been truly blessed. So it's been a very humbling experience.
It's excellent. I love how you're able to support your community in this. I love how you're able to give a voice to maybe amazing organizations in your community that don't have the same voice or opportunities to share. So having them on your show, that's a beautiful way to put the spotlight on someone else. That's great.
Well, I think it would be nice. Sort of one of my sponsors said, it would be nice if your show could be replicated across the United States and Canada, that every state would have somebody there who would start up a similar program and try and bring us all together, without getting too political, just trying to bring us back so we're not all being pushed apart and in different directions. And
yeah.
We all want to leave this planet a better place than we found it. I think everybody wants to do that. So
exactly. We need more things that bring us together as people and less that make us find our differences. There's some commonalities that we all have, and your show helps to shine a light on that. I love that.
Thank you. Yes. And that's one thing I found too in the travels. That was the point of the biography. We all love and we all smile in the same language. No matter what we talk, we all still have that same love. We all still have the same smile in the same language. And despite the differences in cultures, those are the commonalities that we have.
It's a great perspective.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that feeds into everything we do.
Yes.
The more of the world we see and the more people we get to meet and interact with, and again, realizing how great we have what we have in life. When we see other people who don't have what we have, gives us a better appreciation, and it also gives us a platform then to help more people at the same time.
Well, there's no question about it, David. I think travel certainly does broaden the mind. There's no question about that. And you suddenly realize how the rest of the world lives. And we complain about where we're living, and we really don't have anything to complain about for the main part.
Yeah.
Not when you see how 90% of the rest of the world lives. It's pretty sad.
Yeah. Excellent. Now, before we jumped on, Stephen, we talked about where to connect with you. You said you have websites for your books and everything. But where's our main hub that we go to connect with you as an author, maybe a speaker for our event, or just a great inspiring person to talk to? Where would you like to send our audience so they can connect with you?
They can connect with me at, I do have a website for my books. I have one master website. It's www.authorstephen, Stephen, Murray, Murray.com. And if you go there, it lists all of my books. And if you're interested in any of them, you can click on, and it takes you to each book has its own website and shows reviews, upcoming events, things of that nature. If they're interested in, if there's anybody in Nevada who's interested in being a guest on the program, if they're part of a nonprofit, they can just send me an email, Stephen, Stephen, at thegiftofgiving.vegas, and I will receive it.
Good. Awesome. I love it, Stephen. Thank you so much for being part of the podcast. Congratulations on all of these great books you put in the world. You're a gentleman to talk to. One last thing before we go. How are you living your next chapter, Stephen? It's the name of my show. I got to ask. What's your next chapter? What are we looking forward to? Yeah.
Well, right now, I've just last year, my business partner, myself, shut down the business, computer business, after 41 years.
Wow.
Decided it would be nice to sort of retire and start doing some things. Unfortunately, my role right now is in the caregiving role, but that's okay. I'm caregiving for my business partner who had major surgery, but I'll get over that, and then we'll move on. I plan to do more on my TV show and think about sort of upping that. I don't know about doing another TV show. I think one's quite enough for all the research. But I would like to get back and doing some more traveling. And I'd like to get back to writing another book. I haven't written anything this year, but I'd like to get back to that. Those are my two hobbies right now.
Excellent. Stephen, if you make your way up here to Niagara Falls, let me know. I'll meet you at the top of the falls. We'll stand there and look over the falls together.
There you go, holding that umbrella so we don't get drenched. And even with the umbrella, we get drenched. I went to the Niagara Falls and I was not prepared.
No, for the mist. Yeah. Yes.
Well, it was the wind. When I went, I was staying in Toronto and drove around the lake to Niagara Falls, and it was very windy, and it was the water was just spraying us all. And I should have been better prepared, but I saw the falls. Excellent. And that was the main object of the exercise. The fact that I got that was just the price I paid for the pleasure.
I love it. Stephen, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
It's been a pleasure, Dave. Thanks for the invite, and I thank your viewers for tuning in. I hope they enjoyed it as much as I did.
Excellent. Everyone, all the information for Stephen is in the show notes. Go check out his show as well and see all the great people from Vegas doing great things. Stephen, again, you're part of that. So thank you for being part of the show.
Thank you, David. Stay safe and good luck for your future podcasts, all of them.
Thank you, Stephen.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for being here for the Living the Next Chapter podcast. So glad to have you as part of our family of listeners. There's a seat for you just here on Living the Next Chapter, and I'm so happy that you have listened to all the way to the end. Wow, you are now my new bestie. I want to let you know that I host 7 other podcasts on top of Living the Next Chapter. Yep, 8 total. One of them is called the How To Podcast series. If you are thinking, you know what, Dave, this podcast thing seems like a lot of fun, well, I'll give you a secret. It is. It's a great, amazing, fun time where you can get to meet great people, get your word out there, promote your book, promote what your coaching program, whatever you're doing. Podcasting is great. And if you want to learn how to do this, what you're hearing right now, head over to howtopodcast.ca and look up the How to Podcast series on YouTube, whatever app you're listening on. You'll find me there. And I'd love for you to come listen to how to do this. And if you're interested and have questions on how to podcast, reach out to me. at howtopodcast.ca. Thank you for listening. Talk soon.